Wired into technology transformation, this is the Digital Bulletin podcast.
Hello, listener. Thank you for joining us. This is episode 24 of the Digital Bulletin podcast, this month with an exciting new flavour as we welcome a special guest onto our panel. But you know we simply couldn't make it through without the man who I believe has appeared on every episode in our illustrious history. It's CEO Romilly Broad. Romilly, how are you?
Is it every episode?
I think that is true. I mean, I can't validate that with actual data. But
I've been trying to get out of it for ages, and wow, I'm really bad. Anyway, yeah, it's good to be back.
You can't stay away, really. And next to Romilly, in a virtual sense, but in reality, on the other side of the world, we have Adam Markowitz. Adam, hello.
Hello. Thanks.
How are you doing? You excited to be here?
I am. Thank you.
Really excited, I hope. It's a very exciting thing. Haha.
So Adam, call. I bet you don't do those very often.
So Adam is co-founder and CEO of a company called Drata, which we're going to hear all about in a minute. Plus, we'll be chatting with Adam about his career and the newest trends in the security space. Rom and I will also review our recent case study on Ericsson. But first, listener, here is your news roundup. It's been a busy few weeks post-summer in the tech industry, and we've already had another AWS Microsoft spat. Charlie Bell, 23 years a senior executive at AWS, has left to head up cybersecurity operations at Microsoft. But AWS isn't making it easy, with Bell having a non-compete clause. This is all now being played out in public and could maybe go to court, so watch this space. Now, we've seen a somewhat surprising acquisition in the shape of Intuit, the company behind financial products like QuickBooks, buying email marketing specialist MailChimp for a hefty $12 billion. Nobody saw that one coming earlier this year. Elsewhere, Intel revealed that it could spend up to $95 billion on new chip-making facilities in Europe. If anything can contextualize the global semiconductor crisis, then it's that story. We've also seen Google announce plans to develop its own CPUs for laptops. Databricks close a funding round at $1.6 billion to continue that success story. And Facebook has presented its first ever smart glasses. But we're not going to talk about that. You can get access to the best reporting on those stories and many, many more via the Bulletin on digitalbulletin.com. But now we're going to focus on today's guest, Adam. Thank you once again for joining us. Now, Adam is a very successful tech entrepreneur, which we're going to hear all about. But there's only really one place for us to start. Adam used to be a rocket scientist. Now, I'm sure that's very interesting. Certainly the first rocket scientist we've had on this podcast. Rom, when he was a child, I'm sure would have loved to have been a rocket scientist, but ended up being a journalist instead. It rhymes, right? So, Adam, first of all, tell us all about that. That's cool.
Sure. I think, well, right off the bat, once you have that on your resume, you can never do anything embarrassing or stupid again. If I even trip off a curb, it's wow, rocket scientists can't even walk. But yes, my background traditionally and education-wise, and my first job was in aerospace and astronautical engineering. I worked on NASA's space shuttle program for 5 years after undergrad, until NASA retired the fleet in 2011, 2012. So that was a dream come true type of job for a nerdy kid who always wanted to be an astronaut, to then be helping launch astronauts into space. It's pretty surreal. I'm really glad I had that experience, especially right after undergrad, 2008 of all times, to be trying to enter the workforce when the market crashed. It was pretty brutal out there.
Yeah. And
can I?
Yeah, go on,
Ben, you're the interviewer.
No, I want you to interrupt me. So interrupt away.
Ben's main passion, apart from what we do here, is sport. I'm just a nerd. And so what exactly were you doing there? And obviously you joined the shuttle program just as it was being shut down.
Oh.
So that was an interesting move, but you got to do it, which most people, well, nobody can now do. So you get to say that, right? But what exactly were you actually focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, I can say in 2008 when I started, none of us realized the program was coming to an end,
right.
after a 30-year streak. So that was that was pretty eye-opening. Just having that experience as well, going through the tail end of that program, really opened my eyes to entrepreneurship. But while I was there, I was a structural engineer working on the main combustion chamber for the space shuttle main engine, which was the reusable rocket engine that powered the space shuttle. When the space shuttle would launch, you've got the two main boosters, but those would come off as it was going up, and you had the three main engines that would power for another 5.5 minutes, which is basically a controlled explosion. So some pretty amazing opportunity to get to work on something like that. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy statistics out there, but the walls of the main combustion chamber, right, are as thin as a piece of paper. And on one side, you've got liquid hydrogen, the second coldest liquid on the planet, negative 400 degrees. And on the other side, you've got the exhaust at positive 3,000 degrees. I mean, just mind-blowing stuff that was really hard to even fathom. And, coming right out of school to be able to work on something like that was, again, it was just kind of surreal.
Wow, that's amazing. And well, I think we had a similar sort of trajectory, I think, you and I. So I came out of university and served ice creams on a beach for 6 months.
I did that as well.
Oh, did you?
During
Right.
the summers in between.
Anyway, Ben, I'll let you. Sorry, I'm just getting in the way. Sorry.
No, what I'm really interested in, Adam, is how, because obviously your career has taken kind of a different shape, and you're now working in tech and security. But what lessons from that very kind of interesting time when you were very young, very early in your career, what lessons do you still sort of have and have taken into your career going forward?
I mean, on one hand, it was just a pretty awesome responsibility as a 21-year-old coming out of undergrad, to be doing what I was doing. Everyone at the company we loved so much, exactly like the why behind everything that we did. I mean, we would have astronauts walking through the office, shaking our hands, thanking us because our work literally helps them come home to their families. And it's just again, everyone I talk about it's just so surreal that I had that experience so young. And then fast forward to almost at a drop of a hat, the program just ended. And here I was, the younger kind of generation of engineers coming in, and kind of got to witness folks at the tail end of their careers, just how quickly it could come to an end without any say in that. And it kind of the golden kick in the butt, they call it, when that program ended, to one, appreciate the opportunity, and then also start to take ownership of where I was going to go next, and kind of be the master of my own destiny. And really, if be able to look back, and if something moving forward, if something didn't pan out the way I wanted, being able to understand why, basically point to my own maybe mistakes or missteps that led to that. That's just kind of how I realized maybe a little more self-awareness into what I wanted and what I didn't want, having gone through that experience. That was kind of the steps that led to me starting something new and something of my own.
Yeah, really fascinating stuff, Adam. So yeah, tell us about what happened next. We're going to talk about Drata in a minute, but between stopping being a rocket scientist and launching Drata last year, what path did you take?
Yeah, so I mean, part of the reason why I landed that job after undergrad, I mean, I was a decent student, but it was 2008 and the market crashed, and it was a hard time finding a job, but somehow I landed my dream job. And really the life hack, as they referred to it at the time, as an engineering student, I brought a portfolio into my job interviews to help me basically prove my skills to employers. I was just always taught the best way to earn trust is to first prove you deserve it. So I wanted this proof, right? I had my resume like every other student, but we all went to the same school. We took the same classes. We had similar GPAs. So why was I going to get hired over the next person at this company doing my dream job? And so I literally I call it a portfolio. I stapled photographs of different engineering projects that I worked on, even outside the classroom, to the back of my resume. And it worked like a charm. I mean, it added a whole new dynamic to my job interviews. And I always knew there was something to that, directly correlated to me landing that job. But it was in the back of my mind. Had a great job, and I was actually doing grad school at night. It wasn't until the program ended, the space shuttle program ended, that I thought maybe there was something more to that life hack. Maybe students still are feeling that pain, and this is years later. And so after doing a little bit of research, decided why not? Why not build something from scratch to help other students do exactly what I just had done to land my dream job? Basically create a network. I called it Portfolium, combination of podium and portfolio, really helping students have the opportunity to take center stage, present evidence of their skills to employers, and help employers on the other side find the best talent wherever it might be across the globe, uh, not based on GPA or where they went to school, but what they could actually do and what they're passionate about, their potential. So pretty lofty endeavor for someone who didn't even know how to code to go build something like that from scratch. But I think, again, having gone through that experience at the tail end of the shuttle program just gave me not confidence, but just the gumption maybe to go and try. And the worst that would happen is it doesn't work out, but I learned a lot along the way. And yeah, that was 2012. I watched a lot of YouTube videos, learned how to code enough to be dangerous, and built the first version of what I was calling Portfolio. And that was the beginning of a 6.5-year journey, beginning to end. The company was acquired in February of 2019 by a company called Instructure, the makers of Canvas, a learning management system for higher ed and K-12. But yeah, a lot learned over a 6.5-year journey, I could tell you that.
Rob, have you got anything you want to chip in with at this point?
No, I'm still thinking about ice creams because I feel like I haven't really moved on that far. I mean, it's fascinating. What do you think? Obviously, you sort of launched, and I pun not intended, but I'll pretend it was out of NASA and rocket science and engineering into an entrepreneurial kind of path successfully. What was it about your experience on the engineering side that set you up, do you think, to succeed? Because most entrepreneurs obviously don't succeed. They've got the confidence, but not necessarily the full toolkit that helps them to get there, or maybe just don't have the luck. But was it just the idea that you've already done impossible things, so maybe you could do more of them or something?
Probably. No, I think at the highest level, I think engineers are problem solvers. I think that's just what they're kind of classically trained to do. It's how they're wired. And starting a company and being an entrepreneur is nonstop problem solving. So I think that is a nice advantage and why you see so many engineers kind of transition over. And then you've got to have just like the kind of self-awareness, and thankfully I have amazing parents and raised me to believe in myself with a certain self-esteem and empathy. And I grew up also playing a lot of sports, a lot of team sports, which I think also helped in terms of recruiting, building, and leaning on others, right? There was no way I was going to be able to do this by myself, and didn't have any kind of ego to think I could do it by myself. It was from almost day one, surrounding myself with people who knew a lot more than I did, that I could learn from and that I could enable and kind of get out of their way. These are things, again, that kind of came more naturally to me, which I think was an advantage. I didn't make a lot of those early mistakes of just trying to boil the ocean and do everything. And I've seen that happen before as well.
Okay, Adam, let's talk about Drata now, and maybe you could describe your company in a way like what problem is Drata solving for organizations, and try and this is all about SOC 2, isn't it? Now I'm hoping you call it SOC 2 because I'm going to call it SOC 2. What is SOC 2? What does your company do? What problems are you solving for businesses?
Sure. Yeah. So Drata is a software as a service company. Helps our customers, they stand up and maintain a strong security compliance posture through automation, right? So Drata connects to a company's cloud systems, and then it's able to continuously monitor its security controls, identify gaps as they form, collect evidence for compliance audits. We started with SOC 2 compliance, but now since then we've launched an ISO 27001 product, and that's going to continue to expand into other frameworks as well. And so SOC 2, it's a compliance framework. It's created by the AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and it's meant to help companies basically prove their security posture, prove they're doing the right things when it comes to protecting their customers' data, which could probably the next question is, how do you go from rocket science to e-portfolios to compliance automation? Very, very fair
Correct.
question. I could, um, and so it was just like Portfolio came out of my own personal need, making that jump from college to career. The idea for Drata began when we were back at Portfolio. So we were selling our software into colleges, universities. So that was a key kind of differentiator for us at Portfolio. We sold the software to schools, college, universities. They would onboard all of their students into this social network, where the students would then showcase evidence of their skills in these portfolios and connect to employers. So you could imagine selling software to university campuses. They're essentially paying an annual license. They're putting their logo on something public and then putting all of their student data into it. From essentially day one, we had to basically prove we were going to protect that student data. And the best way to do that, and the most common way to do that, was with a SOC 2 report, which is the result of any SOC 2 audit, which is something that you're going to want to do annually if you are a SaaS company. If you store or process customer data in the cloud, SOC 2 technically applies to you. So our company realized, what it took to get and maintain that SOC 2 report, doing it manually. And our eyes got pretty big when we realized there's a way to help streamline and eventually automate that work, to where you're not just checking a box for compliance sake, but actually focus more on the security aspects, which result in a compliance audit and report. So after the company was acquired in February of 2019, myself, my same co-founders, core engineering team, we got back together with a lot of muscle memory. This was just last year to basically start Drata, write the first lines of code back in July of last year.
Rom, this is fascinating stuff, isn't it? Because you're kind of learning that entrepreneurship and business is about really seeing opportunities, isn't it?
Right. And I'm not going to get into our story, but obviously we're also co-founders of a business, very different one, nowhere near as clever, but we do our thing, and actually it's a similar story. And I think when people follow something that they're intimately familiar with, and you don't need to go out necessarily and test the marketplace to understand that there's a need for it, because you've been living it, and you've got the skills and the ability to actually address it, then you've got kind of the springboard you need, right? And I've got a question. So in terms of the when someone comes and uses your platform, how many man hours do you think that they might save if they come and use your system? Because presumably it sounds to me like you were dealing with this problem, selling stuff into highly regulated environments, very sensitive environments, and it's the sort of admin that would drive you nuts, isn't it? Surely.
It is.
Yeah.
Companies spend on average, hundreds of hours a year just maintaining, their compliance certifications and reports, and it's a lot of manual, repetitive tasks. And usually it's looking backwards, right? You're not in the moment or even proactively addressing things as they happen. And so compliance can get a bad rap. Audit even is a dirty word in a lot of cases. It's scary, and companies will avoid it. We work with a lot of mid-market and SMB and even startup customers. And as you'd imagine, and this is where we really empathize, because we were one of them. We were a startup company at Portfolio trying to do this while focused on so many other things. Even viability as a company and product market fit. And so to go and dedicate hundreds of hours, engineering hours, to get this first SOC 2 report, I mean, it wasn't a trivial decision. And then a lot of work to go do. And so if you could automate that, we're saving hundreds of hours per year, because it only gets more and more time consuming and strenuous the bigger your company gets. The biggest irony here is the earlier you do it, the faster it is, the easier it is to maintain, and the cheaper it is. But we also empathize with reality. It's not the first thing that you wake up in the morning to go pursue, especially as a startup.
I guess, Adam, as well, that with more and more data being created by organizations, but in industries at large, and with cloud infrastructures becoming more and more complex, the ability to be able to automate this compliance is something that is becoming more and more kind of critical, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, infrastructure is code. I mean, the fact that you could automate so much these days, it's like, why not automate the monitoring of your actual security posture? Like that, it's just a trend that we know is the future, and then we're living it. And it's great actually being our own customer, right? I mean, even back at Portfolium, as much as we all loved what we did, we had our own portfolios on Portfolium. We weren't students anymore. We had already graduated, so we could do all of the research and try to get into the shoes of our users. Here, we were our very own first customer. We didn't come out of stealth in January of this year until we had our own SOC 2 report in hand and used our own tool to get it. Just on good faith and principle alone, we weren't going to have paying customers in the system without using it ourselves first. And so that was, just kind of speaks to some of our core values around trust. It's interesting, right? When I talk about Portfolium and how it was all about helping students prove their skills to employers, right? Earning trust by proving they deserved it. It's exactly what we're doing here. Again, it's a completely different space. But our customers are proving their security posture to their customers, to the auditors that are coming and actually conducting the audit. So I mean, as different as the companies are on the surface, they all come back to that same core value of trust, being such a core piece of what the product's actually delivering.
How global are you there? Yeah, obviously you're still really young. You're like a tiny little baby of a company. It's only, and you did it in a pandemic, right? That must have been fun. How, what's the trajectory for the next few months? Where are you going?
Yeah, I think everything maybe this time around is going through a different lens of appreciation. I think that's the best way to put it. Portfolium, first time founder, I could tell you that absolutely nothing came easy. Nothing. And not that anything is easy this time, you just have a little more muscle memory. And when you get the same team back together, that's a key competitive advantage on day one. So much muscle memory, so much trust was built over years of working together that we were able to build so much so fast from July of last year till we launched in January of this year, that we really surprised a lot of folks out there with just how robust the product was. Again, we had the muscle memory of doing it ourselves to some extent at our prior company. And so that's a competitive advantage anytime. But during a global pandemic, where I could imagine if we were hiring folks, training, onboarding, ramping during that period instead of building, it would have taken a lot longer to do what we did. And so on one hand, we were very, again, appreciative of just the opportunity, appreciative of our health with everything that was going on in the world. It was, if we're going to be locked inside, let's spend that time wisely and come out of stealth in January and kind of take the market by storm. So it's been a wild ride since we officially launched in January, and just I think even our most aggressive models didn't predict the sheer pull of this market and the opportunity and the size of it. We witnessed it ourselves, right? So from 2017 to 2019, we were selling Portfolium into universities, and we witnessed, again, firsthand, the requests for our SOC 2 report go from kind of a nice to have, almost competitive advantage, to absolute table stakes must have. By 2019, it was, if you didn't have one, it was more telling companies who not to do business with than the other way around, because it became the bare minimum, like the minimum bar to earn their trust. So yeah, perfect storm timing wise for what we're doing.
And I know, Adam, that you guys had a fairly chunky funding round, I think announced in June this year. So things are going to accelerate pretty quickly. Like what does the next kind of 6 months, a year, 5 years look like, do you think?
Yeah, it's continuing to build, continuing to build the team, the product, supporting our customers. One of the best things about getting our first 100 customers in the first 45-ish days after launch was, there's the obvious benefits of that, but more than anything, we were able to learn and iterate so quickly with the voice of 100 customers in our ear that fast. We are extremely, everyone says they're customer centric. We're customer obsessive, and we put customer success at the center of everything that we do. And so it was, a dream. Again, I said nothing came easy the prior time. Not that this was easy, but it took us years to get our first 100 customers at Portfolium, right? So just the time horizon, the velocity at which everything's moving this time around is just night and day difference. So for everything from the funding to the growth of the team, to obviously the growth of the customers. So now it's about making sure we're even set up for hyper growth, especially going into next year, putting all those pieces and people in place to make sure we get there.
You're on another rocket.
I said I always wanted to be an astronaut. Now it's just a different kind of rocket.
And Adam, what about yourself? Now, obviously, during this conversation, we've learned that you've thrown yourself into very different industries and had success. What do you see in the future for you personally? Do you have any other itches that you want to scratch? I guess you probably don't know right now, because as has happened before, you kind of grasped those opportunities when they were presented to you, when they were presented in front of you. So do you have a yearning to do this entrepreneurship thing again and again and again and sort of keep going for it?
Yeah, I mean, my wife can attest to this. When I commit to something, I'm all in. I get kind of tunnel vision and a bit obsessive. So, I am very much in tunnel vision on how we could build Drata into a market leader, a massive company. There's so much to be done, and it's such a meaningful, worthwhile, mission. And we see it every day when we're sharing our data constantly with so many new applications. And I look at things differently, even after just a year and a half here now at Drata, right? Where my data lives, how it's being stored, how it's being processed, who it's being shared with. That there's a lot to be done. So it's gonna be a long and fun ride. So I'm looking forward to that. I do personally love helping other founders learn from my mistakes, because I've made plenty of them, and that's where I've done most of my learning. Again, I surrounded myself with people who had been there and done it before when I first started. So, paying it back, paying it forward, however you look at it, it's really rewarding. So I do carve out some of my time even now to do that, and I want to continue to do that because it's just another worthwhile endeavor.
Well, we'll help you with that by publishing your email address and phone number,
Perfect,
along with the podcast. I'm not sure what there might be a security implication.
I think that's not going to be SOC 2 compliant.
Yeah, possibly.
Pretty inspiring stuff. Rom, have you got anything else you want to quiz Adam on while he's here?
This is a really silly question, but do you still? Everything you've just said is absolutely amazing, and I know that what we are almost certainly going to end up writing about you guys at some point. Because that's what we do when we're not talking into microphones and things. Outside of that, of being on an entrepreneurial rocket, do you still have any interest whatsoever in engineering things that go into space or fly off things or explode?
Pretty timely with the SpaceX launch yesterday of the first all civilian crew to space. That was historic and definitely, oddly nostalgic for me in a lot of ways. Because that's the dream. That was, that should have been me.
Well, there's lots of extremely successful business people who are throwing themselves into orbit of late. I noticed that they keep pinging off. It's like someone's unstrapping them and they're sort of flying off at a tangent because they've just got so much money. It's just flying off into space. Maybe that's what this is all about. You're going to set up your first hotel on Mars or something.
Yeah, you feel like you reach a point where the problems you're solving just can't be big enough to satisfy that urge that you've got to think about the existence of like the human species on other planets.
That's where we're all going. That's it. In the end, there's nothing that can sate your thirst anymore, but replicating the story of Lost in Space. So that's where we'll all end up. Anyway, that was a completely pointless question, but I'm glad I could ask it.
It rounded the conversation up nicely, I think. Adam, it's been brilliant having you on. Thank you so much. We're going to let you go now and get on with some proper work. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Brilliant. Meanwhile, Rom and I will be back for more after this.
Find us as Digital Bulletin on LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram, and at Digi_Bulletin on Twitter.
For this month's case study review, we are going to chat about our front cover story on networking giant Ericsson. I had the privilege of speaking to a number of leaders from Ericsson's managed services business area. This is the unit that helps telcos operate their increasingly complex networks. With the twin pressures of rapidly rising usage and greater customer expectations, not to mention the advent of 5G, telcos are feeling the heat. But this is where managed services come in. Ericsson is deploying sophisticated AI, automation, and data analytics techniques to transform network operations under these new levels of demand. Here is the unit's leader, Peter Lorin, to explain more.
The future of managed services is very exciting because the thing is that these networks that we have, the 4G networks, the 5G networks, have never been more critical for society. And I think the pandemic has shown that we are all relying quite a lot on that internet connection at home or that mobile broadband connection. And just imagine for a second when this now will be not only your personal, so say, Facebook experience or Netflix experience or your work connection, but it will be industries that connect, societies that connect, autonomous cars that connect, hospitals that connect. All of that connects in a wireless environment, right? And you need not only just best effort, you need super resilient networks that are that even your heart surgery could depend on it, right? So in that scenario, the operations piece becomes super important. And the networks are not becoming less complex, they're getting more complex. So here's where the excitement and the future of managed services, because we see that the operations will be an important component in making these networks so reliable so that all of the society that depend on it will work. And the thing is that AI and machine learning will no longer be a nice to have, it will be a must have to do that operation.
Bringing you back in here, Rom, now. Interesting stuff there from Peter. I think when I was putting this case study together, I couldn't believe that managed services in Ericsson employs 28,000 people. But when you think about it, Ericsson itself is such a key player in the global connectivity revolution and 5G, isn't it? Like, I think that case study highlighted that as much as anything.
Yeah, I mean, they build it and they own it and they manage it and they make it work. And frankly, they've been doing basically the same thing since like the 1870s or something, haven't they? I mean, as an institution, they are in large part responsible for the fact that any of us are connecting to anything and sharing data and stuff at all. And so, you know, what's kind of impressive, I suppose, is that all of those people still exist, still at the front edge of everything that's happening. And everything he speaks about is true, in the sense that now is a really exciting time to be doing all of that as well, isn't it? And with he's talking about the application of AI and automation and things like that, which are kind of necessary because everything else has become so ubiquitous and complex and rapid moving that you kind of have no hope of managing it effectively unless you develop some really advanced ways of keeping it all humming along.
Yeah, exactly. He spoke in the article about what he called a unique opportunity, a kind of once in a lifetime moment where obviously we've got the advent of 5G, we've got the advancement of things like AI and cloud, obviously, all coming together. But then you have the against that, the kind of extraordinary demand that we as a human race now have for connectivity. He said there about, you know, connected cars and really critical use cases like that. So while there's a lot of great opportunity, it's almost like this stuff is absolutely critical as well, right? And it's Ericsson needs to be doing this, and it's a huge company that I'm sure has got many established processes and ways of doing things, and it's having to kind of uproot those things in an exciting way, but it's having to fundamentally change how it does it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, you could look at Ericsson and its products and its services and the infrastructure that it's built as increasingly what's the right word, fundamental to what the world is now doing, in terms of not just because of pandemics and things, but because this was kind of happening inevitably anyway, where while we spend a lot of time talking about technology, and obviously it's all about technology in terms of what they're doing, and a lot of that being very advanced, ultimately neither he nor us nor anyone else is really talking about technology. We're talking about how people have and businesses and everything about society is fundamentally changing the way it's operating. Over the last 18 months, that's accelerated a bit and brought it into sharper relief. But really, the way we drive, the way we commute, the way we get from one place to another, the way we address the climate crisis, all of these things are going to fundamentally change the way we as people live. And Ericsson is going to be right at the heart of enabling all of that. And one thing I think that shines through when he's talking is they understand that. I think there's a sense of purpose about what they're doing. They understand that in the eyes of the common person on the street, Ericsson is often a company that used to make phones and now doesn't. But actually, they are root and branch behind and under and in between everything that's going on. And it's kind of, I mean, obviously you were the one doing the interviews and so on, but from my perspective, it was quite a privilege to sort of peel the layers back and peer inside and see how that all happens.
Yeah, no, it certainly was a real privilege. I only wish we could have gone over to Stockholm and spoken to Peter and his colleagues in person, because I think we'd have got even more of a kind of an insight there, and seeing people face to face and traveling over and spending proper time with them, it'd have been a real privilege. But certainly speaking to these people, and these are very, very senior people. Peter himself is on the board of Ericsson. He's in charge of the managed services units, but he's on the board of Ericsson as well, a company that employs more than 100,000 people. And people is what I want to talk about next, really, because certainly one of the most interesting aspects of the managed services story is how it's working with its own people, as I said, all 28,000 of them, to help deliver what they call the networks of the future. And a key element of this is a major upskilling and reskilling program led in part by Charlotte Levere, head of people, who tells us more here.
People is at the center of everything that we do. They are the ones who are driving the change. They are the ones who are now coming in with brilliant machine learning, automation, and AI skills. And they are the ones who are building the future networks. So people is hugely important for us. And it's also, our responsibility as a company to ensure that we see the shift of the workforce as well. So I mean, the amazing thing about the new technologies coming in is that we now have an opportunity to remove repetitive, mundane tasks that a machine can do. But what we also need to see is that we need to see the shift of our people moving into more advanced way of working. So we have a really fantastic opportunity now with the operations engine, working with our customers and ensure that our people actually are there to go into quite deep, complex problem solving.
Charlotte mentioned the operations engine there. Now that's the sort of single platform that is at the center of Ericsson's whole operations approach with customers, and you can read all about that in the article on digitalbulletin.com. But obviously Charlotte is in charge of the people aspect of it. And Ron, this is a fascinating area. And outside of that clip, Charlotte confirmed to us that Ericsson has already, managed services has already transitioned 10,000 people into sort of different roles, and they've been upskilled and reskilled to kind of fit with this new way of working and to adapt to the way these technologies have changed their, fundamentally what they do every day, as you were saying. We talk a lot about kind of digital skills and the problem of the skills gap, but that's some effort, isn't it, to have achieved that at that scale?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but one of the advantages Ericsson has got is, first of all, being Ericsson, and therefore an extremely desirable place to stay and go through that if you're already there, but also an extremely desirable place to go to if you're of someone of the requisite skill levels and so on. Partly because of where Ericsson is in the world. It's an attractive place to be if you want to go and maximize your potential as an employee somewhere, right? So that's got to have helped. But even Ericsson recognizes that in order to address these challenges and a desperate lack of digital skills generally around the world, they were going to need to look after their own people in a fairly serious way, right? Although I bet they're hiring, aren't they? I bet they're doing a lot of hiring.
There's a lot of hiring as well, but I think the
Yeah.
the kind of core message was this one of, we've had people, many of whom I'm sure have been there for years, if not decades, who are having to just fundamentally become different professionals, have learned completely new skills to fit in with what they're doing. Now, a part of it is that Ericsson wanting to what they call democratize learning, and that means sort of putting learning at the center for everybody and moving away from people having the same job for years and only doing those jobs and focusing instead on supporting people by building their skills and working with projects kind of as the driver. We hear a bit about that quite a lot, don't we, Ron? That kind of approach, but again, at scale, that seems to be the way Ericsson is going, and it kind of is the future, isn't it?
I think, yeah, and actually that's probably a recognition strategically of the fact that the way people view their life journeys and their, the jobs that they do and the things that they become skilled at is changing as well, all in part because of everything that Ericsson is doing, right? It's building the infrastructure of a new world, really, and people are viewing themselves differently in that world. And you're right, we do hear this in other places where, an historic challenge for large companies is specialists are either trained or hired, and they do that for a while until, being human, they decide, well, I think I need to try something new. Normally the way they go and do that is to hold on to the same specialism and just go and do it in a new place, and so therefore it's slightly different. What Ericsson is saying is, like, well, no, look, we're doing amazing things in the world, but if you feel like you want to change that up and do something a bit different or advance or move sideways or whatever it is, they will build an infrastructure internally that allows that. And the result is extremely multi-talented people who've got a broader set of skills and things to bring to the table. When you've got people who are expert, or at least partially expert, in more than one area, you're able to solve problems and be much more diverse in your ability to think about new things and seize opportunities and confront challenges, etc. But more importantly, you're able to retain those people, and the longer you keep people, the more you're able to retain the institutionalized brain, if you like, of those people, because the longer someone is ever in a place, the more difficult it is to replace that person, because they inevitably build up a stock of ingrained knowledge, and they take it with them. So it's a really positive way of doing things. It reminds me actually of when we spent some time with Deutsche Telekom, who I'm assuming is an Ericsson customer. They certainly obviously deal with each other, who actually have a very similar view to that. And as part of that, obviously they're addressing things like diversity amongst their employers, the gender gap in some of these technology areas and things like that, knowing that all of this is vital ultimately to them achieving their objectives over the longer term.
Yeah. Oh yeah, ultimately it's a very clever way of reshaping the workforce, isn't it? Because you feel like the people benefit, and obviously the company is benefiting from it as well. So yeah, I think that the case study goes into a lot more kind of depth on all sorts of different areas, but for me that people element and how Ericsson has managed that in a relatively short space of time with a huge amount of people is really, really interesting. Right. That is a wrap for us this month, folks. As I said, if you want to dive into the full Ericsson case study, you can read my article and watch some videos over on digitalbulletin.com. Other plugs are these. Our sister platform, Tech for Good, has just launched a new podcast called Teenage Tech Stories, all about extraordinary young people doing extraordinary things with technology. Believe me, it's well worth a listen. In the latest issue of Digital Bulletin, we have case studies also with Mars, the company, not the planet, and Polish chocolate manufacturer Lockvidel, a personal favorite of mine, that one. The last thing for me to do is to thank you, Romilly. Thank you very much.
No problem. No, thank you as well.
Thank you. And thanks to you too, listener. We'll catch you next time. Goodbye.
That was the Digital Bulletin podcast. Listen and subscribe to a range of podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. Plug in for news, features and case studies on the very latest in enterprise technology and digital transformation.